Hello, and this is week 2 of ELE 510 online. I'm Rhonda Bishop, and we're going to talk a little bit this week about identity and reflection. So let's get started. So some of the points that we're going to talk about this week is everybody is unique. And I think that's what makes teaching amazing is that everybody brings something different to the table. Um, you did some reading from The Heart of a Teacher, and it talks about we teach who we are. And I think that's, again, a connection to the first point that I made. And I also wanted to share with you, and I have put it into the videos, what the reality of teaching looks like. So Jerry Brooks, he is a retired administrator, but he's also um, kind of a comedian, but the video that he shows this week is not as funny as some of the things, but it is talks about the reality of teaching that I would like you to kind of review and think about as you're putting all the information together this week. And then I'll talk very briefly about the activities that I'd like you to complete this week. Okay, so one of the things that we need to do in this class every week is that we have to have some guidelines. We're going to talk about some hard topics, and some of those topics are some that you may not have experience with, and that's okay. We all start at some spot in some place, and I think it's about keeping an open mind and to not disengage from the conversation. So making sure that we are, participating and thinking about some of the things that are going to be presented in this class. It's also about being respectful for others' perspectives and what they bring to the table. Again, that all ties back to the being unique and that everybody is different. And I also want you to think about not just your own perspective, but how the perspective or some of the topics that we talk about impact students that might be in your classroom. So I think sometimes when we think about it from that point of view, we kind of soften some of our thoughts and processes about different things. And I just want you to encourage yourself to think outside of what you know. I think sometimes we're all going to be experiencing things that we've not been exposed to before. And that will happen in your classrooms. It'll happen with your families. It'll happen in your communities. And we need to make sure that we are aware of how we present ourselves in different situations. So just some of the guidelines to kind of remember how to start. So let's start with The Heart of a Teacher. If you haven't read this yet, please read it. It is one of the best articles I have ever read. It talks about why we are teachers. And I think what's really important is some of the highlights that I have pointed out, but there's so many good quotes in there in that article that you can just pick out something that you're going to connect with. But if we talk about when teaching is done well, it's a personal act. It is not just about content. It is about your heart and soul of everything that goes into that teaching process. We talk about how you bring your identity and your level of integrity into it. So it's a reflection of who you are. And it's also important that you're making those relatable connections to your students and to your families and the community. Teachers and students have a better connection when they can actually successfully do this. And the teacher's in the driver's seat for that. Also need to talk about being authentic and how important that is for you in a classroom. I know sometimes we may feel, and especially at the beginning, and I think sometimes to some degree we all feel it at some different times, is that we feel like we're impersonating or that it's we have that imposter syndrome. And sometimes I think we do when we're just a little bit unsure of things that may be happening or how we're going to do it. I think you may feel a lot about that, like in your first years of teaching, because you're just trying to figure out what that next step is. But being authentic about it and being transparent, I think, is one of the things that helps us connect to students and to families, because we all know that we're human. And I think that's that human piece. And of course, we need to, the other piece that's really drawn out is the values and beliefs, and that we do have guiding principles, and that's what guides our teaching philosophy and how we run our classrooms. And I think once we're more aware, self-aware of that, I think it's can help us in our decision making, and it helps us create a positive classroom culture. And I think that's really important of how we instill those in our students, and just being ethical, and you know having a compass, an ethical compass that helps guide you, and that again that sets that positive example for the students. And then just talking about the passion and being passionate and committed. I think when we are passionate about what we do, I think students understand that we're passionate. And I think that just ups the game. And I think it also is very important that students see that you're passionate and they want to get involved with that. And I think the resilience piece of that is super, super important in our commitment, is that we follow through. And sometimes it's going to look like, that you need to maybe change directions or anything, and that's okay too, because that goes a little bit back to that transparency. I think students, when they see that we finish a task and that we're resilient in it, I think they see that they can do that as well. And that just sets another good example for them. And I think that the piece of being culturally competent is something that we always need to work on. And I think, again, this is one of the pieces that I feel like we're a lot at different places just because of our own experiences. And I think that we have to understand our students. We have to know, how do we create a classroom that is inclusive and thinks about the students that are in our classrooms, the cultures that they live in, and how do we honor and do those so that our classroom is an environment where everybody feels welcome and safe, and that they're all able to learn. Because we know that if we don't feel safe and we don't feel we have those basic needs met, it's hard for us to learn in those situations. And that goes the same for us as adults as well. And then by showing respect for our students and creating those positive and supportive learning environments, help students thrive in all situations. So being generally compassionate, ethical, all of the things that are listed are super important. A couple of the things that I thought were very interesting, two of the quotes that I pulled out, and some of the things that you're going to do this week is that you're going to pull some quotes out. And these are two that really stood out to me. And the first one is the place where intellect and teaching is where the place where intellect, emotion, and spirit and will, they all converge in the human self. So it's not just about content, it's about you, who you are as a person, and the emotional piece that you bring to that as well. And the second one is a paraphrase, but it talks about our passion for teaching stems from our enthusiasm for certain subjects and our commitment to helping others learn. I think those are two hand-in-hand things that I see as well. So some of the things that I want you to remember, about the heart of a teacher is that teaching is more than a job. It is a vocation. It is your passion. It can be your mission. Teachers are vulnerable, and you are in the public eye. You have students in your class that are connected to those families and those communities. And so you have to be willing to be okay with being vulnerable. It is so important for you to self-reflect. It is so easy to get caught up in content and everything I need to teach and do, but reflecting, the self-reflection piece, if you do not teach yourself to do that, it will really, teaching will be harder if you don't do that. So part of this course and the activities that we do in this class are pieces of self-reflection that really talk about who you are as a teacher or who you're going to be as a teacher. I can't stress enough the power of being able to tell stories. I think we learn so much from when stories are told. And some of the videos that you're going to watch this week are people telling their own stories about social justice in their lives. And I think that the stories that they tell are just incredible. And your students are going to really, really appreciate the fact that when you tell a story, because it's not real learning then. It's more of a story, and that's what we are. It's what we are as storytellers. Building an inclusive and community in your classroom is key, and you have to spend the time each year building that community. And I think it's very important that some may feel that this may be a waste of time, but I believe that you can't establish a good community unless you start working on building it specifically. Care. You have to care about the kiddos that are in your class. I don't care if they're 3 years old, or in some cases where you're in my class, where you're in your 20s or your teens or your 50s. I don't care who you are, but if you're a person in a classroom, you have to care as a teacher. And I honestly care and need you to reach out to me if there's something I need to help you with. And again, just talking about being authentic, how important that is. You have to find ways to fill your spirit, to fill yourself, so that you can actually do this for others. It's kind of like that airplane syndrome, with the mask. You know how the mask will drop, and they always tell you to put your own mask on first before you help others. If you don't help yourself, how can you help others? And then the importance of courage. Courage is so important in teaching, and it's about doing what's right for your kids. And then teaching, one of the comments that comes out is teaching can be a healing profession as teachers help students grow and develop. There's nothing like it, seeing students when they are in that learning mode. So just remembering all the things from a heart of a teacher. I'm going to ask you again to actually pull some of the things out that you connected with in this article. So in the heart of a teacher, think about these things. Does it matter who a teacher is as a person? And why do you think so? So identify those quotes that stand out to you from that article. And in the article, Palmer says it's critical not only to know one's subject and one's students, but one must know oneself. And why is that important, do you think? These are just things to think about. And why should teachers research themselves? So thinking about those things. So I told you about Jerry Brooks. This is a picture of what it looks like when it comes up. It's actually a Facebook post, but it's not, you don't have to sign into Facebook to actually watch it. So I'm interested to hear how maybe some of this information comes out in your concept map as well. It's not very long, it's about 3 minutes long, but it talks about the reality of what your classrooms will look like. So it's really important, and I think it'll be eye-opening for you and interesting as we build this into our conversation this week. So Walk a Mile in My Shoes, there was, I believe, 4 videos that are presented in the social justice piece. And there's a link in your week 2 reading. But the first one was Amanda Morales, and she talks about social justice and what it means to her. And so again, I picked out a couple of quotes that I feel like that really resonated with me. And she talks about setting aside the lens that you own yourself and truly see the world through new eyes. So not just looking at it from your perspective, but also from others' perspective and what it looks like differently. And she also talked about looking in depth of student identities. So looking to see what they struggle with, what their dreams are. That's how you start really connecting with your students. Alex Redcorn had a very good documentary talking about um, being talking about he is indigenous and from Oklahoma, and he talks about being a member of the Osage Nation. And he talks a little bit about not only why he chose to teach, but he talks about how he has multiple identities. He's a teacher. His father grew up on the reservation, and Alex did too. That he spent time living there. His mother is white. I believe they said Irish Catholic. And so talks about all of those things and how it has made him who he is and how it impacts his whole life, not only being a teacher, but all of those things and the research that he does. And first, the quote he picked out was he talked about why he chose to be a teacher. And I think it really is something that I can relate to too, is that in the power of affecting how it can affect young people and change their direction and some of their trajectories. I was very interested in the statement when he talks about how he talked about when he was teaching students how he, how of his Indian heritage and how he looks blonde and white, but he uses that as a jumping point to talk about that the color of your skin is not your culture. And I think that was really a remark that resonated with me. The other one that resonated with me, and maybe some of you can relate to this as well, but talking about the curiosity that students may have about his Indian heritage, his indigenous heritage. And then he talks about how those conversations come about. And he talks about it being mostly curiosity because they've never been taught anything about what Indians are supposed to look like, thus how he looks a little different. And then he talks about the school curriculum that students are exposed to, and then how it basically stops teaching what the Indian path is, because after like the 1800s, we don't see a lot of what indigenous people are today, that their impressions just stopped, after the removal. And so that's kind of interesting. And I think he makes a very valid point. So he just talks a little bit about how these identities have impacted him as well. Then we had Jim Teagarden, who actually was a business owner and then became a special education teacher. And he talks about what diversity looks like to him from his perspective of working with students that have unique needs. And he talks about dealing with diverse populations doesn't always mean that it's a loud voice or hard discipline. And you can tell just by the way he talks that that's probably not the style of teaching that he does. But he talks about how reflection is so important and how it's important to get feedback from your students. And he talks about what social justice means to him, about access and stability, and talking about we, not I. And then Tara Lander talks about being a military student, a military kid, and how she moved around a lot and how different things affected her at different times in her life. When she talks about being aware in middle school about some of the microaggressions that were occurring, but she talks about what she feels social justice is, and that means that everybody's included, that it's inclusive. And I think her story is very interesting, and she talks a lot about her research, and I think that's very interesting too. And the last one is ELE. And ELE was actually a gifted and talented student. And again, These videos are very short, so I mean, it's very interesting, but he talks about the difference between equity and equality, but he also talks about how schools, the looks of schools from the outside are sometimes perceiving about what is inside or what's not inside to support students. And I think that's really interesting. And I love that he says that he chose elementary to teach in elementary because of students needing a role model. So you've heard me say the words identity, and you've heard me say the words perspective, and you've heard me talk about what the different identities they have. And we all have multiple identities. So to give you an example, this is actually one of the activities that you're going to do this week. But I went ahead and did my identity wheel. The identity wheel is available for you in week 2 so that you can actually do one so that you can turn it in. You can print it out, you can write out it online, however you want to. But it just shows you all the different things that I feel like make up myself. So we can start with something easy. You know, my identity is female. Some of the things about my family: I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a grams. I like to consider myself a very cool aunt. That I do things with my nieces and nephews that are different than others. I'm also a military mom. So one of my sons is in the military. So that, I think, identifies us as well. Talk about my religion and spirituality. I'm very faith-based. My community piece was a different one for me to do, but I talk about that. I feel like, especially, we're not going to talk politics, but it's very important for you to vote. I think it's important for us to serve. I'm very passionate about public education, and I also serve on boards and communities that are important to me. So I try to give my time for those. Some of the other things, my hobbies and interests, those are things that I feel like make up me. And then my beliefs and my values. I believe in being an American. And I believe that's a very, very diverse definition. I believe in choice. I believe in choice. And I believe in family. I believe in family, and I believe that family looks different for a lot of people, but it's still a family. And I think that's very important. So these are some of the things that make up me. And I think it's really good for us to stop and think about who we really are and really put words to that. Okay. Got a little crazy there. So this is what your identity wheel will look like. I have it uploaded as a PDF for you. So you also, as you're thinking about when you're going to make your video for this week, for your discussion board, think about the identities that the people that were in the documentary also had. So, trying to make those connections. So your assignments are listed for the week. So you have the identity wheel that you need to do. You have a concept map that you will need to create. And then, of course, do the readings and videos before you do those. You're going to create a shared Google Doc with me. This will be the beginning of how we are going to create your autoethnography. So we're just getting a jump on next week. It's going to be a blank document right now. That's fine. There's instructions in this week's module on how to share that with me. You're also going to create that discussion board video using your information. So I would not upload my concept map or my identity map until after I make my video. That would be my big advice to you this week. So next week is going to be a big week. We have several articles on autoethnography, and we're going to use these articles on autoethnography when we start creating our paper, which will include a literature review. So we're going to begin our research. So we begin our research actually by reading. We're going to have some information on citing and referencing on how we're going to do that for our paper. Going to use a little bit. I'm going to give you some direction on how to use AI. I'm going to talk about when we can and when we cannot use it. And then we're going to connect our, every week, we're going to connect our weekly learning to what our project is that we're creating, which is our big autoethnography. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and to let me know if you need any other support. I also wanted you to definitely point out to you that on the schedules, there are going to be some lives that I'm going to do. I've actually put those on the schedule. If you have questions about different things, those are live times that I'm going to be. You are not required to do those. However, if you want real answers and different things, I'm making myself available to you so that you can actually do that if you wish. So you might check out those times and dates that are on the schedule. So let me know if there's anything I can do to help you, and have a good week.